Oh, come on.
Hello, what's up? Gleb Alexandrov here for CreativeShrimp.com. Creative Shrimp is the place where artists go to learn the tips and tricks about computer graphics, art, and coffee brewing. And welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Photogrammetry is a very hot subject right now. So many people are making 3D models out of photos automatically using the photogrammetry technology, and this is so exciting. I want to jump into that boat, but the question is, can we use photogrammetry if we have $0 budget and some cheap camera? And the answer is pretty much yes. In this tutorial, I will show you the complete workflow, which requires $0 on your side and just some cheap camera. So keep watching. So in this tutorial, we'll be taking a look at a completely free photo scanning workflow, which involves VisualSFM, PMVS, Meshlab, and Blender. But you'll still need some kind of camera to make photos for photo scanning. So let's jump straight in the tutorial. And the first step, the optional step, would be to make a bombastic Star Wars model. Because you know, every photo scanning tutorial starts with some boring trees, rocks, and other stuff. I thought to myself, why can't we make something more exciting? Like a Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. That sounded like a very cool idea, and actually it was a cool idea. Right, and the first step of this tutorial is to obtain the photos for the photo scanning. So what we did is created this cool installation. I imagined that this is Tatooine, alright? And after we created this miniature, we started taking photos. All in all, we made about 74 photos, and we tried to cover every possible angle while shooting. So we just orbited around this model, and after that positioned the camera lower to the ground, and made another circle of photos. The trick is to shoot in the manual mode with the fixed exposure. Okay, so we obtained 74 photos of Millennium Falcon. And here is a quick tip, you can quickly resize images in the batch mode using picresize.com website. Okay, and the step number 2 is download the free software. I will show you step by step how to do it. First of all, let's Google for VisualSFM, and pretty much the first result would be what we need. VisualSFM, a visual structure from motion system. I'm clicking on the Windows 64-bits distributive. Okay, so I downloaded it. Now let's Google for the second thing, that is called CMVS-PMVS. I'm also typing GitHub in the search, and better not to mistake it with Pornhub. Okay, so this is what we need, CMVS-PMVS. I'm gonna click clone or download, and download a zip. We have almost finished the quest. The third thing that we need is Meshlab. So no surprises here, I'm just typing Meshlab. Meshlab.sourceforge.net, and I'm downloading the latest version. Click here, and if you watch this tutorial in 2045 or maybe earlier, the links might have changed. That happens sometimes, you know. Now after we downloaded it, we have to install this software and not screw it up, because it's so easy to screw it up. What we have here is 2 zip archives. Let's extract them. I'm just selecting extract here and deleting the zip. And let's do the same for the VisualSFM. And also you'll have to install the Meshlab, but I've already done it. Okay, so now go to CMVS-PMVS folder. Binaries Windows and Windows 64. Here's the tricky part. We have to copy all these files into the VisualSFM folder. So copy, go up once again, and go to the VisualSFM folder and paste these files here. Now we should be good to go, and believe me, this is a tricky part, because I almost banged my head against the wall while I was trying to set it up correctly. Next, I'm gonna match the images using VisualSFM tool. Go to VisualSFM folder and open the visualsfm.exe, and the interface might look daunting, but don't be afraid. Let's just click on this Open Images button, navigate to folder with all the photos, and I'm gonna select everything and click Open. I can say that usually something from 50 to 200 images works best. Okay, we have to wait now for a little while the photos update. And there you are. Here we have 74 photos of Millennium Falcon. We have to match these images somehow. Let's click on this Compute Missing Matches button. This will hopefully take just a few minutes, but it can take a few hours as well, depending on the number of photos. And after it finished calculating, we can start reconstructing the 3D points, the sparse points. I'm gonna click on SFM, Reconstruct Sparse, and watch this. This software is reconstructing the 3D points in real time, and this is a very exciting feature. Basically, I haven't seen this feature even in the paid software. So this is something very cool, and it takes just a little while, and it created these cameras for you. And also it created the 3D points, of course. Now we have to compute the dense points. This will be a pretty time-consuming step. Okay, so let's press SFM, Reconstruct Dense. Now we can just create the folder where we put the dense reconstruction, and I'm gonna call it Reconstruct. And the name of the file will be falcon_reconstruct, and hit save. This will start the process of reconstructing the dense points. This is a really time-consuming step. It can easily take like eternity. So if I were you, I would consider going outside, taking a cup of coffee, something along these lines. And one thing to note, if something goes wrong during this stage, double check step 2 of this tutorial and make sure you have installed everything correctly. Okay, now we can go to the View menu and select Dense 3D Points, or just press Tab to toggle the Dense Points visibility. So what we see here is the reconstruction of the 3D model, automatic reconstruction, by VisualSFM tool. That's looking great, and I can't wait to export it to Meshlab, because the next logical step would be to generate the geometry. We have points, but we still need the geometry, so let's open the Meshlab. By now we should have it installed. Right, so open Meshlab. I'm gonna go File, Open Project, then navigate to this Reconstruct folder and select falcon_reconstruct.nvm. These are the 3D points that we generated in VisualSFM. You can see that the rotation is a little bit weird. We can just orbit around the model to get a more reasonable angle, so to speak. Also, I'm going to enable layers by clicking on this layers button. So here's our 3D points and our original photos. I'll go ahead, select this tool, select vertices it's called, and delete the unnecessary stuff. You can hold Ctrl and click and drag to add to the selection. Now I'm going to delete this unnecessary junk. And after that, I'm going to come over to the File menu and select Import Mesh. And in the same folder, you will find falcon_reconstruct.ply. Hit Open. Now you can see the dense points on top of the sparse points, and you can enable and disable visibility by clicking on this icon. And what I did here is left only the dense points visible. And with each new layer, I will clean it up a bit, because I hate these isolated vertices, they cause so many problems. So I'll just click and drag to select this trash, and I'll hold in Ctrl to add to the selection. And then I'm just clicking on this Delete Vertices button. What we have to do now is generate the surface, the polygonal surface out of these points. I'll go to Filters, Point Set, and choose Surface Reconstruction. Pause on. Let's set the octree depth to something like 12 to increase the quality of the model. And set the solver divide to 7, hit Apply after that. And woohoo, we have a pie. And we have a window in it. And it's very convenient. Now we can see what we did here. Meshlab, really, thank you so much for giving us a window. Okay, so I disabled the visibility of the PLI model. And now we need to click on this Poisson Mesh. Select the Face Selection tool and click and drag like this. And delete these faces. The mesh optimization is a necessary step to just get a clean mesh after all. If you don't do it, you'll basically get a pie all the time. Okay, so I've selected the edge polygons and I'm clicking on this Delete Polygons button. Actually, I like how it looks. We're getting very close to the final result. Let's now select these protruding faces and delete them. Do it one more time. Select this bunch of polygons, delete it. What I'm doing here is orbiting around the model and trying to see what else can be deleted. Maybe this bunch? Yeah, definitely. And maybe also this one. Yeah. It's awful, I hate it. Okay, now it looks great, and the next step would be to simplify the geometry, because we've got about 1.5 million polygons, and that's a lot for a paper model of Millennium Falcon if you ask me. You can click on this wireframe icon to see the wireframe, and it looks so dense. What we can do is simplify it by going to Filters, Remeshing, Quadric Edge Collapse Decimation. That sounds very scientific, and I like it. Let's set the target number of faces to something like 500,000 or maybe 700,000. It still is an awful lot, but this will be a lot more manageable than 1.5 million polygons. Click on Apply button, check the progress bar, and after it finishes, you can see that the mesh is simplified. And before we move on to texturing, we have to do one thing. Click on Filters, Cleaning and Repairing, remove faces from non-manifold edges. If you don't do it, everything will explode during texturing. And you don't want it. Let's start generating the texture now. Probably it's the easiest step. You just go to Filters. Let me see, Texture, Parameterization plus Texturing from Registered Rasters. And these names of functions is a nerdgasm. Alright, so let's set the resolution to a very high number of 8192 and call it Falcon_texture_01. After that, click Apply. Wait till the texture is generated and you can see the progress in the lower right corner, but the texture isn't displayed in the viewport. What I'm going to do is click on this flat and texture icons. Now we can see the texture. We can zoom in to really appreciate the details. And what you can also do is disable the lights by clicking on this button. This will allow you to see only the texture without the lighting information. And after you've satisfied your curiosity, you can export the file to Blender. You can do it by going to File menu, hit Export Mesh As, choose the OBJ format, just click on this drop-down menu and select Wavefront Object, or just .obj. Name it somehow like Falcon_Elton John, I don't know. Something that is descriptive. And let's disable the normal checkbox, because we don't want normals to be exported, and hit OK. This will generate the OBJ file with the texture. You can navigate to the Reconstruct folder, and what I want to do now is select the Falcon texture and the Falcon model, copy it by pressing Ctrl+C, create a new folder, and just paste it into this new folder to keep things organized. You can click on the texture and see the UV map, and it's pretty crazy. It's just a bunch of rectangles, but it looks pretty well. You'll see how it looks in a moment. Let's now launch the Blender and see what we can do with this photoscanned model. Maybe we could create some beautiful animation or render, who knows? Let's go File, Import, choose OBJ format, navigate to the folder with the model and click Import OBJ. Right away we can see that the rotation is weird. First, let's press Shift Ctrl Alt C and choose Origin to Geometry to move the origin point to the center of the model. Now double tap R and rotate the model like this. What I want to do here is just fix the model orientation, okay? Now I'm going to press G and move it to the center of coordinates. I'm pressing G and Shift Z to constrain the movement only to the horizontal axis. And maybe press R and Z to rotate it on the Z axis. And I think that looks correct. I'm going to come over to the Materials tab and rename this to Falcon_01. Click on Use Nodes. What I'm going to do now is assign the image texture. Go Image Texture. Now click on Open and select the Falcon texture that we generated in Meshlab. Let's wait a few seconds till it updates. And now we can switch to the material mode. And we can see the texture on our model. And that's looking awesome. Take your time, orbit around the model, enjoy it because you create the model out of photos automatically. And a few years ago, I would have sold my mother into slavery to be able to do that. Okay guys, now let's change the camera and render settings. First I'm going to click and drag on the corner to create another window. And let's switch to the node editor. Now I'm creating yet another window. The right window would be the camera window. So let's add the camera. Press G to grab it, move it over here. I'm pressing G and Z to move it vertically. And now I'm just hitting Ctrl and 0 on the numpad to enter the camera view. And here is a quick tip. You can press Shift F to enter the first person mode and use WASD keys like in shooters to move. Okay, and I'm setting the focal length to a lower number, to something like 24, to make the camera appear more wide angle. And I'm switching to the rendered viewport mode. And because our shader is set to diffuse, we have to adjust the background intensity. Let's crank up the strength of the background light. And also let's take a look at the render settings. Let's go over to the render tab and switch the computing device to GPU if you have a video card that supports CUDA rendering. Also, I'm setting bounces to 0 to speed up the rendering. And let's set the start resolution to 512 to reduce the noise during the viewport updates, and the tiles to 256 to make the render faster. And because we set the start resolution to 512, you can see how it affects the noise level during the update. It makes everything less noisy but slightly less responsive. But I think that's totally worth it. Go for it. Now let's add the details. What I'm going to do is enter the edit mode by pressing tab. Now I'm pressing Z to enter the wireframe mode. Now I'm going to press B and drag the selection rectangle around this part of the model. So we have selected this part of the sand landscape. Now we can press Shift D to duplicate it. Wait a few seconds, press left mouse button, then press P to separate selection. So we have cloned the part of the sand and we can use it to kind of hide the transition between the background and the foreground, or simply create the background. So I'm gonna turn on the rendered mode. Now I'm just grabbing this part of the model and trying to create as seamless transition as I can. And maybe let's duplicate it once again by hitting Shift D and position it over here. Okay, what else we can do here is add the point light. I'm gonna go ahead and press Shift A, then select lamp, point. And this may look very fake and artificial, but if used correctly, it actually can enhance the image. So let's come over to the light settings, crank up the size to be 0.5, and reduce the strength drastically. Now we can see that it looks sort of plausible. It works, it really works. But sometimes I just prefer to have the emission shader instead of the diffuse shader. Let's see how it works too. Let's go to the material editor, add the emission shader, hook up the texture in it, and connect it to the surface output. This looks pretty good too, as the photoscan process captured the natural light, but I'm gonna switch to the diffuse shader for now. Right, that's looking great. Let's apply a bit of a post-processing to the image. This is purely optional step, of course. We have covered the basics of photoscanning, but now let's make it beautiful. And the first thing I'm gonna do is increase the alpha to kind of constrain the vision of the camera. And you can easily orbit around the model by placing 3D cursor on the model, set the pivot point of 3D cursor, select the camera, press R and Z. That's a cool little trick. Okay, folks, I'm gonna open the color management tab, and you can switch, for example, to film emulation, but I'll do all the color grading using the curves. Let's enable the curves, and now you can do all kind of things. You can, for example, crunch down the shadows, and hit Ctrl and click to create another node, and move it up a bit. Also, you can clamp down the highlights like this, and maybe manipulate the individual channels. Let's try cranking up the red channel and reducing the blue channel as well. You can quickly toggle between the raw and the post-processed version by clicking on Use Curves. That's pretty much it for the color grading. Now we can make a test render. Let's come over to the render tab. Go to the sampling menu. Set the samples to something like 50. We don't need a large amount of samples, 50 will do. And now let's go to the passes menu and enable mist pass. Now in the environment tab, let's set the mist start to 1. I'll leave depth at 25 and see how it works. Now let's hit render. Wait just for a few seconds till it renders, because it renders blazing fast. And I'm gonna open the node editor in the bottom left window. Right away, I'm switching to the compositor mode. Click on use nodes. Create some space for the other nodes. Mix node. Drop it over here. And what we can also do is right away add the color ramp node, because I know we're gonna be tweaking the mist pass. So let's hook it up to the factor. Drag the color ramp output here. Right, now we can tweak the right flag and see how it affects the image. What we are doing here is mixing the original image with the white color using this mask, the mist pass. And I think that looks slightly off. Let's tweak the depth of the mist pass, set it to 10 and render again. This should look more correct, and yeah, it's looking better, but it's still off. Maybe we should tweak the start parameter. Right now it's set to 1, let's set it to a lower number like 0.2, hit render, and bam, everything is white. Winter is coming to Tatooine. Let's tweak the right flag. And now the fall-off of the fog effect is very gradual, that's what we need. And voila, this little trick helps us to hide the transition between the photoscan geometry in the background. Now we can change the color by clicking on the color swatch. This is looking very cool to me. I think we can render some kind of animation out of this. Yeah, actually, animation sounds good enough to me. Let's start the ball rolling. First of all, we need to see the timeline. So what I'm gonna do is drag this to create another window and choose timeline. Now we can animate the camera, for example. I'm setting the pivot point back to the active element for no particular reason. Now I'm pressing G and Z 2 times to move the camera backwards. In other words, by pressing G and Z 2 times, we can move the camera by the local Z axis. So let's slide it back like this, and this will be the first keyframe. Let's press I and select location to create the location keyframe. And now let's jump to the end of the animation. This is the frame 249, and move the camera forward. Press I and set the location keyframe again. Or maybe move it even closer to create a really intimate zoom. And don't forget to set the location keyframe, okay? Now I can press Alt-A to preview the animation. What I love about photoscan stuff is that it's so easy to render. You can preview the result right in the viewport window, and that's awesome. Now I will enable the persistent images checkbox to make animation rendering a little bit faster. Now I'll define the folder for the animation files and call the animation somehow like Falcon Animation Test. No surprises here, isn't it? Okay, let's choose the format. I'm gonna choose AV JPEG just to be able to quickly preview the video, and I'm hitting the animation. And the resolution is set to 50%, so it should render very fast. Now I'm gonna pause the video and show you the final result. So here we are. This is our photoscan Millennium Falcon, and I love the result. Even though the scale of the sand is a little bit off and we can continue working on texturing and blah blah blah, still it looks very promising. Alright guys, I hope you liked the tutorial. That was Gleb Alexandrov for CreativeShrimp.com. If you think that other people would benefit from knowing this workflow of free photogrammetry basically, feel free to share this tutorial. Just do it right now, because it would be so great to have many people using these tools to create awesome models out of photos. That will be a photogrammetry revolution. Just click on these share buttons on YouTube or wherever else, and let's make it popular. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Once again, this was a free photoscanning workflow that requires some kind of camera, but overall it's free. You just need VisualSFM plus PMVS plus Meshlab plus Blender. Oh, have you shared this tutorial? I just can't get enough shares on my social media. Let's make the world a better place. Let's share this video. That will reduce the emission of CO2.